PseudoPod is extruded into this universe from a dimension of purest fear. It's beautiful in its own alien way, but what's to come will unsettle you. PseudoPod, episode 670, October 18th, 2019. This week's story, The Devil Came to Mamie's on Halloween, by Lisa Morton. Welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. I'm Alistair, your host, and this week's story comes to us from Lisa Morton. It was first published in Cemetery Dance magazine, and you can find full details of Lisa and her other work, all of which is well worth chasing down, at our website. The link will be in the show notes. Your reader for this week is the truly fantastic Laurice White. And your audio production is done by none other than the magnificent Mr. Marty Peratt. Without further ado, the four of us have a story for you, and we promise you, it's true.
The Devil Came to Mamie's on Halloween by Lisa Morton. Narrated by Laurice White. It was Halloween night, and business was slow at the whorehouse. Leona didn't put much stock in the stories that kept other folk indoors on this night. She'd laughed over stories about Jack-o'-lantern who'd once outsmarted the bad man and then couldn't get into hell or heaven, and so on Halloween he wandered around lighting his way with the coal kept in a pumpkin. She'd once seen the strange blue lights in the bayou that some said led unwary travelers to their doom on this night, but she didn't really believe they were spirits. And her favorite of Miss Mamie's girls, Lizzie, had talked about going down to New Orleans once and meeting up with a real hoodoo man who she'd watched bring a dead boy back to life on All Saints' Day. But as much as Leona loved Lizzie, she thought even decent, smart folk could sometimes be bamboozled when they found something they just plain wanted to believe in. It was about midnight now, the witching hour, Leona remembered Lizzie once calling it, and the swamp just behind Miss Mamie's was dark and quiet. No flatboats poling up to the dock tonight unloading new customers. Leona wondered again where Lizzie had gotten to. Beulah the cook said she'd left out the back door about 4 that afternoon, just as the sun was going down. She'd taken a big kettle with her and said she'd be back around night. It wasn't safe to wander around the bayou any night, and Leona couldn't imagine where Lizzie had gone. It didn't help that Mamie's scrawny old cat, Lumpy, so named because he was as black as a lump of coal, was missing too. So Leona sat on the back porch, waiting, hoping one or the other would show up soon. Beulah had already gone home, and the kitchen was cool, but the night was unseasonably warm and humid. Usually she'd have to be in the main parlor, playing the piano for the customers, but there weren't many of them tonight. Leona cranked the phonograph again and settled back on the old splintered wood of the porch steps to listen to Ma Rainey. Harold, Miss Mamie's bartender and muscle, had been into town today, and Leona had given him 75 cents to get the record for her. It was Travelin' Blues, and Leona swayed back and forth, humming along as the song spilled out of the phonograph's big horn.
I went to the depot, looked up and down the road. I went to the depot, looked up and down the road. I asked the ticket agent if my time is wrong.
Leona had listened to the song enough now that she'd be able to play it on the piano when she went back in. If anyone wanted to hear, she could sing it too. Fact was, She thought she could sing it just as good as Ma Rainey herself. One of the funny things about Miss Mamie was that she only wanted live music at her establishment. She claimed the menfolk didn't want to hear just records. Although Leona knew plenty of menfolk who liked Bessie Smith and Ma Rainey and Sippy Wallace. Miss Mamie, though, said she paid plenty of money for that piano, and live music gave her place a touch of class. Truthfully, Leona was glad because it gave her a way to make herself useful around Mamie's place. She had a natural gift for the piano and for singing. Unfortunately, even those gifts wouldn't carry her much longer. Miss Mamie had come into the kitchen yesterday afternoon, before most of the other women had even gotten up yet, and she'd called Leona away from the washing and sat her down at the table. Mamie just gotten back from doing some banking in town, and she was dressed up, looking fine for a woman of 40. It was no wonder she still got customers requesting her services. "That Jackson Smith done asked about you again last night," she said while lighting a cigarette. Leona had tried not to squirm. "That so?" "Mm-hmm." Miss Mamie took a drag from her smoke, then went on. "He'd pay extra for you, Leona, since it'd be your first time. We'd both make some mighty nice money off'n it." "I'm not doing nothing with Jackson Smith," Leona had replied. "He's not so bad," Mamie said, squinting at Leona through her tobacco haze. "I know he's not, Miss Mamie, but At that point, Mamie had actually set the cigarette down and leaned across the table, and Leona had to struggle not to lean back away. "Now, you listen to me, child. You 16 years old. You a woman now. I promised your mama, God bless her, to look after you till you was growed. She was one of the finest ladies I ever had work for me, and I owed her. But I figure the time you growed is now. I can't keep carrying you, Leona." Leona had cut her off. "But Miss Mamie, you your own self said I was the best piano player you's ever likely to hear." "I did, but honey, we need somebody to play something livelier here. Not those slow things you like. You put a few drinks in these boys and give 'em that slow music, and they likely to just fall asleep before we can even get 'em upstairs with the girl. Don't nobody make no money then." Leona looked down, hurt. "That slow music's the blues, Miss Mamie. I thought men liked it." Mamie reached out and stroked Leona's wrist. "They do, honey, but it's not good for business. Now, I could get me somebody from town to play the piano, play them nice fast tunes. Might not be so good as you, but I wouldn't have to give 'em room and board neither." Leona had felt a cold chill settle into her then. She'd known for a time this was coming, but she'd hoped she might have a little longer, just long enough to save for a ticket to Chicago or Atlanta and a couple of months of room and board while she tried to get a job singing, maybe even make a record of her own. Miss Mamie had taken a last pull off her cigarette then, stubbed it out in a china plate. "I love you like my own, Leona. You know that. I done raised you since before you could put two words together. But you need to be making a decision. Either you stay here and take up the life, or you move on." Miss Mamie had gotten up then and left. Beulah the cook had worked over the stove in the corner listening quietly. She was a kind woman who came out here to the edge of the bayou every day to work for Miss Mamie. She'd never minded that Leona slept in the kitchen and kept her phonograph there. She liked the music, too. And she liked Leona. She'd waited until Mamie had gone, then she'd come over to where Leona sat, wiping furiously at her tears. "Don't cry, honey," she said in her soft, sweet voice. "You can sing just as good as any of 'em, just as good as Ma or Bessie or Victoria Spivey. You don't need this place." Leona had looked up at Beulah gratefully. "You think so?" "I know so," Beulah had said, giving her a hug that smelled like warm cornbread. "The only men you need to make money is the kind that'll let you sing, and you'll make a lot more money than you'd make here. You believe that?" Leona wished she could. She tried to imagine herself saying yes, going into one of the upstairs bedrooms with Jackson Smith, who would be sweaty and smell like machine oil and liquor, and feeling his rough hands on her skin. She tried to imagine doing that every night, doing that 5 or 10 times a night, until she was too old and none of the men wanted her. Leona felt something hot on her cheek and realized she was crying again. She brushed the tears away, angry at herself. It was a simple decision. Stay or go. Sing the blues or live them. The song finished and Leona lifted the needle off the record. She was about to play it again when she heard something out in the brush near the edge of the swamp. "Lumpy?" she called out, hoping to see the mangy old cat scamper up. Instead, she spotted a light bobbing among the trees, nearing. A few seconds later, the lantern rounded a big mangrove, and Leona saw it was Lizzie! She started to smile and was about to dart forward when she saw Lizzie stop about 30 feet away. "That you, Leona?" Something was wrong with Lizzie. Even from this distance, Leona could see her pale smock, usually spotless, was spotty and stained, and the night breeze took on a terrible scent. Something spoke of death and terror as it passed over Lizzie. "It's me, Lizzie. Is something wrong?" Lizzie took a few more steps forward. "Anybody else out here?" Leona shook her head. "No'm, just us." "Good." Lizzie reached her now, and Leona actually gasped. The older woman was covered in bloodstains, and there were long scratch marks on her hands and arms, marks that were just barely scabbed over. Her left hand was also burned, and Leona saw pink flesh and white blisters, and the smell nearly made Leona gag. "What that smell, Lizzie?" "Leona, honey, can you do me a favor? Bring some warm water, a towel, some new clothes. I can't let nobody else see me like this. Can you do that for me?" Leona couldn't stop staring. "Should I get the doctor?" No, that's not my blood. It's Lumpy's." Leona placed that awful odor now. She'd smelled it once when Lumpy had lost part of an ear in a fight with a raccoon, and he'd somehow covered himself in this acrid fear scent. Lumpy? Lizzie made a fluttering motion with her hands. "Oh, honey, we'll talk about that old cat later. Can you just get me those things now?" Leona nodded and ran off. 5 minutes later, she had a pail of warm water, towels, and a new dress. She stood by as Lizzie stripped out of the remains of her old clothes and started to towel that smell off her skin. "What happened to Lumpy?" "I'm sorry, Leona. I know you like that critter, but he's dead now. Just as well anyway. Cat's bad luck in a whorehouse." "Dead?" Leona actually flinched from the news. Lizzie looked at the girl carefully. "Leona, honey, can you keep a secret?" Leona nodded, but she was already starting to suspect this was one secret she wasn't about to much like. "All right. Remember I told you about that hoodoo man I met in New Orleans? Well, he gave me some secrets." "Secrets?" "He told me how to call the devil." Leona gaped for a moment, then stifled a laugh. If she didn't believe in Jack-o'-lantern, she didn't see much reason to believe in the devil either. "Don't laugh, child. I did it, and it worked." Leona made an exaggerated gesture of looking around. "Where is he, Lizzie? I don't see me no devil." Lizzie ignored her. "Here's what the hoodoo man told me. On Hallowe's Eve, he said, you needs a black cat. You boil that animal alive. Then you take the bones and wash them in a spring until the devil comes to you. Then you can ask him for whatever you want." Leona suddenly realized the meaning of the scratches, the blood, and the burns on Lizzie's arms, of the kettle that Beulah had seen Lizzie leave with in the afternoon, and the knowledge staggered her. "Oh, Lord, Lizzie, you boiled that poor animal alive?" "Leona, that cat was so old he couldn't even catch him a horsefly no more. But that ain't right." "Right or not, honey, it worked. I boiled him near that spring out in the woods, the one not far from old Guffey's farm. Then I washed those bones in that spring, and I looked up And sure enough, I seen this man walking up to me. He asked what I was wanting, and I told him. Leona asked, "What did you say?" Lizzie finished washing and started shrugging into the new dress. I told him I wanted a rich man to come and love me and take me out of this place far away. And he said it happened tonight. Leona guffawed. "You can't believe that." Lizzie finished straightening out the dress. "I can believe it. It's happening right now." She walked up to Leona and gave her a small kiss on the cheek and whispered, "You about the only part of Mamie's I'll miss." Then she walked past Leona into the house. Leona stood for a moment, shocked, unable to move. She toed at the tattered dress Lizzie had left on the ground, trying not to imagine Lumpy being forced into a boiling kettle, screaming in agony as Lizzie held him down. She shook the pictures out of her head, then turned and walked back into the house. She was just leaving the kitchen and heading for the piano in the front parlor when Miss Mamie's bustled up. "There you are, child. We got Johns and we need some music, and for Lord's sake, try to play something lively." "Yes, Miss Mamie." Leona hurried to the piano and glanced towards the bar, where there stood only a single customer. He was leaning across the mahogany counter, chatting idly to Harold while his drink was fixed. He wore a spotless, expensive suit and hat in the most current style and a pale pastel color. His hair was neatly pomaded into curls, and his posture and build shouted confidence and money. When he turned to glance back towards the piano for a moment, Leona's breath caught in her throat. He was, without question, the handsomest man she'd ever seen. He grinned as he saw her with his liquid brown eyes and perfect jawline and gleaming teeth. Miss Mamie was fawning over this newcomer, plainly sensing the money as well, and just before she sat down to play, Leona overheard the name Lizzie. She was into the third bar of Sippy Wallace's Jack of Diamond Blues when Lizzie entered the bar and sidled up to the stranger, smiling. Leona couldn't hear their conversation, but it was only a few seconds before Lizzie cried out, ecstatic, leapt up from the bar stool, gave the stranger a brief kiss, and then ran from the room. The stranger smiled after her and then turned that look on Leona. And in that instant, Leona's fingers failed her because she knew who the stranger was, and she knew that Lizzie had told her the truth. "Leona, honey, play something happy," Miss Mamie called to her, still grinning at the fine-looking man. "Looks like Lizzie done gone and got herself a marriage proposal." Leona tried to smile, but it was a weak attempt. She tried to remember one of the rags she'd heard on a trip to the music store last month, but it came out sounding melancholy. Leona saw Miss Mamie bustle from the room and realized it was just her, Harold the bartender, and the stranger now. She felt his eyes on her and tried to look down only at her hands, moving across the keys, trying to find the sprightly melody that was hidden somewhere inside the tune. "Why don't you play something you can sing to?" Leona started to reply, happened to glance back, and froze, her jaw hanging open like a cartoon character. The handsome black man was gone. The man who had just spoken to her was white, mid-30s, wearing a pinstripe suit. "I heard you can sing pretty good," he said, resting an elbow on the top of the piano, grinning down at her. "I ain't so good," Leona said, not because she believed it, but because she didn't want to talk to him, no matter what color he was, the bad man. "Come on now, girl. You act like it's a sin to sing." "Might be," Leona said. Her palms felt sweaty, and she could hear her heart thumping faster than a rag rhyme. He shrugged and took a step back. "Guess I got the wrong girl. See, I'm scouting for the Toby. You know what that is?" "Yes, sir, I knows." Lizzie'd once had a John who played fiddle for Butterbeans and Susie, and Lizzie had made sure he talked to Leona all about riding the Toby, or traveling the circuit put together by the Theater Owners Booking Association. The fiddler had told her horror stories about being stranded in towns without hotels for coloreds and dealing with theater owners who charged performers 3 times what a meal anywhere else would cost. But he laughed as he told his tales, and Leona could tell he wouldn't give up that fiddle for anything, and it was sure better than working for Miss Mamie. Leona dreamed of a day when people came to listen to her, not just be entertained until they could get a girl to take them upstairs. "I'm looking for new performers. Heard through the grapevine that there was a colored girl working in some backwoods whorehouse who'd knock my socks off. But if that's not you, it's me." What if he really was a booking agent for the Toby? Could she afford to pass up what might be her only chance? And if he wasn't, if he really was the devil himself, then she'd sing like heaven for him and give him a case of the blues he'd never get over. He chuckled, amused, then said, "So sing for me." She thought for a moment and remembered Beulah telling her that she sang hard time blues even better than Ida Cox. She picked out the opening notes on the piano, then let the pain and fear and humiliation and sadness explode deep inside her until all the emotions could only be channeled up through her throat and out through her words, released into the world. "I never seen such a real hard time before. I've never seen such a real hard time before. The wolf keeps walking all around my door." All thoughts of where she was and who she was playing for vanished as she gave herself body and soul to the song. She closed her eyes and just felt and played. And when she finished, she knew she'd never sung that well before. She was drained, covered in sweat and tears, weary with a bone-deep exhaustion she'd never felt before. The sound of slow applause drew her back. She wiped at her eyes and turned to see the white man slowly clapping. He finished and half collapsed onto the piano. "La, girl, they weren't just whistling Dixie. I do believe you may have been even better than Bessie or Ma. You could make somebody a lot of money, you know that." Leona should have been pleased, but right now all she wanted was the comfort of her little pallet in the kitchen's warm pantry. The agent stepped closer, bending over her in what he probably hoped was some sort of intimate, even fatherly gesture. "It really takes it out of you, don't it?" Leona just nodded. "You're too damn good to be stuck in this place. That Miss Mamie, she's okay, but she don't realize what she's got in you. You need to be on the circuit. We can start you touring just a few of the smaller theaters first, but maybe opening for one of the bigger acts. Then we move you on up the bill, get you bigger venues, start recording. How'd you like to see your name on a #1 record?" Leona finally risked a glance up at him and offered a shy smile. "That'd be fine, mister." He laughed. "Atta girl. Okay, so let's make a deal, you and me." Leona's fatigue was suddenly replaced with a numbing dread. "A deal? Sure. Always gotta do the paperwork." He reached into a pocket and pulled forth a few sheets of folded paper and a pen. "Standard contract. All you have to do is sign. Then I'll make your arrangements. In 24 hours, you'll be on a train to Atlanta, ready to play the 81 Theater." Leona knew that wasn't possible. No real booking agent could get anyone into Atlanta's biggest theater in a day, at least no human booking agent. "You're him, aren't you?" "Who?" Leona couldn't bring herself to say the usual names. She settled on the one from the Jack-o'-lantern story, the bad man. She looked up now to see him squinting down at her. He didn't look like the devil. No red skin, no horns, no pointed ears or tail. He looked like what he said he was, and yet There was something in his eyes, something that wasn't right. She suddenly knew this thing standing over her was ancient and intelligent and wanted her soul. Come on, Leona. What's worse? Me giving you the life you deserve, or Miss Mamie wanting to make you part of the life that killed your mama? Leona didn't answer, didn't move. She got the impression that the lights had gone down around her. In an instant of panic, she looked up for Harold, but couldn't see the bar in the sudden gloom. She wasn't even sure she could find her way out of this room now. Look what I'm doing for Lizzie. Giving her a fine, rich, handsome husband. She's going to be happy, Leona. You could be too. Lizzie called you here tonight? He cocked one shoulder in a half motion of apology. Yes, and I know you like that old cat, so I'm sorry about that, but sometimes the rituals must be obeyed. And what you want from me? You know, Leona, it's the usual transaction. Leona whispered, my soul. He murmured in agreement, and then just stood there, looking at her. Leona slid just far enough away from him that she could stand to look up into his old, old eyes. But how would I sing? He looked back at her, and Leona saw the first sign of doubt on his face, a crack in his confidence. You'll still sing just as well. Your voice will still be yours. Leona dared to cut him off. But the voice ain't nothing without the soul. It won't matter. You'll be famous and rich anyway. It'll matter to me. He seemed to gain several inches in height, and the lights grew even dimmer until his pale white face was all Leona could see. So what? You'd rather be working here, letting Jackson Smith grind into you, or worse? How about Parson Mills? He must weigh, 300-400 pounds? How'd you like to have that on top of you, Leona, pounding away at you? And also you can make 50 cents. And get on with the next customer? Is that what you want? Leona's face grew hot and her eyes filled with tears again. No, but But you what? He was furious now, and Leona half expected to see him spitting brimstone sparks. You really think you can get out of here some other way? I got news for you, honey. You're good, but you are not that good. You just be one more little colored girl trying to hustle up jobs until you get forced to be some white lady's maid to earn $1, or worse, wind up as a crib whore in some house that'll make Miss Mamie's look like the Ritz. Hell's gonna look pretty goddamn fine after what life's got in store for you, girlie. Suddenly, something changed in Leona. Something she kept carefully tamped down erupted out, and she let it out. She was on her feet and shouting into his moon-like face. Let me tell you something, mister. I know how good I can sing, and I know there's lots of white men and colored men both who'll try to take advantage of me. But maybe I'm smarter than you give me credit for, and maybe I don't mind hard work and some heartache because I'm already pretty used to it. So maybe the best thing you can do right now is get out of my way and let me leave here on my own 2 feet. Leona walked by him, and the room was there again, and Harold was staring at her as she walked by him, her face still wet but determined. Leona, she ignored him. It took her maybe 2 minutes to rush to the pantry and pack everything she owned into a burlap potato sack. If Lumpy were still alive, she would have taken him too. As it was, she'd leave alone. She'd managed to save up nearly $10 from tips over the last year, and she thought it might be enough to get her a train ticket to Atlanta or maybe New Orleans. She walked back through the parlor towards the front door. Miss Mamie was there staring at her. Child, what? Leona silenced her with a quick kiss and a goodbye. I'm sorry, Miss Mamie. You've been kind to me, and I appreciate it, but I gotta go. Tonight? Leona nodded and headed for the front door, where the bad man stood waiting. You sure you want to go that way? Even if you do get to the city, you know what to do when you get there. Now his laughter was a hollow, bad sound. You're just like a rabbit, running right into the coon dog's mouth. Get out of my way. Leona said. He didn't move. Last chance, Leona. I won't come to you again. No matter how bad it gets, you're liable to be wishing you could conjure me back up a month from now. If you even get that far. It's a bad night tonight. Lots of things out there in the dark that find you mighty tasty. Leona looked straight at him as she reached for the doorknob. Can't be nothing worse out there than what's in here. He let her go. Without another word, she strode out the front door, down the steps, and onto the soft dirt trail that eventually led to town 5 miles on. He was right, of course. It was dangerous to walk this path at night, with everything from snakes to robbers about. Somehow, Leona didn't think they'd trouble her. There was a railway station in town, and she thought the first train came about sunrise. She'd be on it, no matter where it was headed. She cradled the burlap sack in her arms and started to sing to herself as she walked into the warm Halloween night away from Miss Mamie's, never looking back.
Horror without courage is simply degradation. The destruction of self, whether psychological or biological. The destruction of reality, whether perceived or accurate. It's like gnocchi without pesto. It's still a thing, it's still legit, but it's missing something. The genius of this story is that the horror is exactly that. Missing something. It's kind of flat. And that isn't a criticism of the story at all. It itself acknowledges that there are only so many ways the devil can appear to you. And I love how it explores the obtuse ritualistic paths of contact and the very real, human, mundane, and horrific costs of them. This is a story steeped in horror and history, but also a story that knows to take its shoes off at the door. This is horror not grounded, but defined by courage. Specifically, the courage of the lead. Courage to look away from an easy solution with a high price towards a near impossible solution with a higher one. The self-awareness to know any deal is a bad deal, and that regardless of a price you pay later, this is not a price you pay now. The sheer guts to stare the Prince of Darkness in the face and say, "No thanks, mister." It's almost beyond comprehension. Then you get to the collision between art and commerce our offer also represents. Keep your voice or take the money is a problem so many artists face, and there's no right answer, just the one that's right enough, right now. That's what she learns here, finding serenity not in the early climactic lie of the deal, but in the fight the deal offers her a way around. There is every chance nothing will work. There is every chance everything will work, unless she takes the deal. And finally, of course, the issue of the time, of race, of a far more grounded and real and still very much present horror. To know that could be waiting for you, to know what it could mean and to still choose it. That's not just a massive middle finger to the bad place, it's courage the likes of which is almost undescribable. Who says horror isn't inspiring? Who says horror isn't hopeful? Thank you all. We rely on you to pay our authors and cover our server costs, and we're currently working on two things. The first is paying our authors more. In September, the SFWA raised their qualifying rate to 8 cents a word. We're not there yet. We are inside $1,000 of it, and I know that sounds like a lot, but we've jumped $250 the last 3 months because of your generosity and the tireless work of our staff in promoting what we want to do. Simply put, we feel authors deserve to be paid more. We are entirely donation funded. In order to pay authors more, we need more donations. It's really that simple. We also want to pay our associate editors, who are our slush wranglers. They're the unsung heroes of the entire industry. They deserve so much, and we would like to start with paying them for their time. So if you can, please go to PseudoPod.org and click on Feed the Pod. There you can either donate or subscribe through PayPal, or alternatively go to our Patreon page, which will be in our show notes. The $5 level on both helps the most, and the $5 level gains you access to a whole ton of really cool freebies. So do check it out. We'll be back next week, and when, as now, we will be a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. And I leave you with this quote from Crossroads Blues by Mr. Robert Johnson, a man who took the other choice to the one described here. Standing at the crossroads, baby. Rising sun going down. See you next week, folks.
It's a pseudopod. It's a big foot.
It's all about podcasts these days.